Okay. Good morning. This is March 20th, 2011. I am Commissioner Jody Filkins-Weber, Chair for today's proceedings. Roll call, Ms. Sargis.
Commissioner Aguirre.
Here.
Commissioner Anchetta.
Here.
Commissioner Baraba. Here. Commissioner Blanco. Commissioner Dye.
Here.
Commissioner DeGiulio.
Here.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
Here.
Commissioner Forbes.
Here.
Commissioner Columbus-Malloy.
Here.
Commissioner Antai. Commissioner Parvenu.
Here.
Commissioner Raya. Here. Commissioner Ward.
Here.
Commissioner Yao.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. As I stated yesterday, we're pleased to have gotten to this particular point. It has been a difficult process, and we, in today's proceedings, will be a little tedious in moving forward through this process, but I would like to assure the public, based on other comments that have been made, that the decisions regarding the entire bid process have been made in consultation with our Chief Counsel, the Department of General Services, and the Legal Services Division of the Department of General Services as well as myself as Chair over the last month, as well as in consultation with my Vice Chair, Maria Blanco. So this entire process is a little different than what we've seen before, but we're certainly putting this together for the benefit of the citizens of the state of California so that we can make appropriate decisions regarding the necessity for the consultants we need to complete this process and to complete it timely and fairly. At this time, our agenda is on one issue, which is selecting our technical consultant. But at this time, as we do each and every morning, I would like to open the mic for public comment on any issue the public wishes to address on matters that are not on today's agenda. So again, there's only one issue on the agenda, which is technical consultants, and I will be opening it up for public comment shortly here. But if there are any members of the public that wish to address the Commission on non-agendized items, please come forward or raise your hand so we can determine time. Okay. Come forward, please. The process that the Commission has agreed on is generally 3 to 5 minutes. Seeing that there's one member of the public who wishes to speak, you will have 5 minutes. Yes, please. Okay. Ms. Sargis will be keeping track of time.
My name is Cindy Doyle. I actually work for the state, and I also have 2 businesses on the side. And I actually was looking at the district information, and I'm looking at this going, came up with this, was my first thought. Because this is the current one, of course, okay? And I'm looking at it going, what in the world were they thinking? Now, I understand us wanting to actually get, mountain people with mountain people, and in urban with urban, and suburban with suburban. I understand that. But part of the battle we have in anywhere you live is being able to actually listen to your constituents and actually be able to say, what do we got that we have to actually deal with? And I'm looking at these lines and going, who came up with this stuff? And my concern is that we're going to actually bring in a consultant in some fashion that is not going to take into account that this should be more simple than it actually is. And it would be nice to actually look at this and go, why does this look like a bow tie? We've got stuff that spans from Yolo County down to San Joaquin. And I'm going, why? I mean, if you're going to actually have an area, why are you representing not only farm workers, but all the way up to downtown Sacramento? I mean, it just kind of, and shouldn't it be more simple? Does it have to be so complicated? And my first thought is, what's in it for the people who are actually on the boards of these things? Are they actually going to benefit from having a bigger or smaller amount of people in their in their areas, and why? So my concern also is that we're taking into consideration some actual bids, which is great, but are we going to one extreme or the other? Are we actually going to go so far right or so far left that we don't have a middle? We don't have an in-between. We don't have a logical step process to actually evaluate this information and really take into consideration that some of these things are so skewed, all it does is benefit the actual assembly or Senate member. And I think that is a concern, because, I'm sorry, but I am a constituent. I live in actually Assembly District 10, and yes, I'm out towards Rancho area, but I also am looking at this whole area going, what? How many things is she covering here? So she's got a wide variety of people, I mean, my assembly member, but I'm also looking at the Senate districts and also looking at going, that doesn't even make sense to me. So, yes, it would be great if it was a nice, simple little box, great, but my concern for this is the actual consultants that we bring in to do this. Are they taking everything into consideration when they actually do these things, or are they getting little help from the side, or a little influence in some fashion from somewhere? And that's my concern as a voting member of your California. My concern is that we need to take in consideration that we can't have far right, far left. We just need to consider that this is a basic area, and we should make it more simple instead of making it so complicated that I'm looking at these lines going, who thought up this stuff? And sometimes it looks pretty ridiculous when you actually look at these lines. And I'm thinking, I can't even imagine somebody who has, especially this one right here, this district that goes, this is the Senate one, going from yellow all the way down to
1 minute.
17.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. This is so obscure, and it's got such a huge, wide range. I'm thinking, why not make it a small little box? Why is it so difficult? So I would just like for under consideration, when you actually decide and you take the bids and you actually evaluate these places that are going to come in and do this, that there is no outside influence, that they're not so far right or left that we have to worry about what the heck were they thinking.
30 seconds.
Okay. Other than that, I just wanted to consider the fact that it's going to affect everyone, not just you, not just assembly members or the Senate members. It's going to affect all the constituents out there, and we need to be they need to be able to handle their actual areas that they take on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Doyle. Any other member of the public who wishes to speak on matters that are not on the agenda? Please. Or there yet. So any matters that are not on the agenda, please forward. Again, just as a reminder, you have 5 minutes, and Ms. Sargis will let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. My name is Peggy Sadler, and I live in Simi Valley. And I read an article recently that suggested that you might consider moving Simi Valley out of Ventura County and lumping it in with Los Angeles County in your redistricting. And this really frightened me. So I was going to be in Sacramento today, so I decided to come over and speak to you a moment. Maybe you know, Simi Valley is in the southeast corner of Ventura County. It's separated from Los Angeles County by a mountain range, the Santa Susana Mountains. You have to go through that to get to Los Angeles County. That's on the east side. On the west side, it opens up into Moore Park, Camarillo, the fertile fields, agricultural areas, and up to Ventura, where our county seat is. All of our county government and all of our services come from that area. We have county fire stations. We have county sheriffs that patrol our unincorporated areas. And Simi Valley has grown into a very nice community of about 120,000. But we are not connected to Los Angeles County. We're connected to Ventura County. We have our own city government, but we also have county courthouse in our town. We have our own park district. We have our own school district. That's not the way it is over in the San Fernando Valley. They're part of Los Angeles City and Los Angeles governments, and we have no connection with that at all. It would just not serve. I think you're charged with trying to keep community integrity, which was my understanding. This would totally skew that for Simi Valley and for Ventura County. And I really hope that you will not consider moving us out of Ventura County, because we have no connections with Los Angeles County, city government, or county government at all. We are really self-contained in Ventura County. And I think that such a move would violate your charge to keep the community integrity. So I just thank you. That's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you, Ms. Sadler. Any other member of the public who wishes to discuss items not on the agenda, please come forward.
Good morning. I'm Robert Reichert. I live in Sacramento County outside of Elk Grove. I'm coming today because I was reading the newspaper and then heard a few rumors. Well, not rumors. Obviously, it's fact. I actually applied for the commission, and when we voted as people of California, and even those of us that applied, the assumption was that this was the commission, redistricting, was going to be done by citizens. That was the hope and the fervor of the people of California. Now I understand we're hiring a consultant to come in and help you guys make a decision. I don't disagree with the consultants, and obviously you've already made a decision. My only problem is I feel like we're abrogating what the citizens of California really asked for. There's enough people on the commission, enough intelligence, supposedly based on the questions that I had to answer, that you shouldn't need a commission. The educational level of the people on this commission should be as good or better than any consultant you could hire. It's not hard to sit down and figure out where the people of California live, who they are, and how they should be represented. By bringing in consultants, we are bringing in bias. I doubt seriously there's any consultancy out there that's not biased. And based on some of the ones I've seen in here, we have some really left-leaning ones and some really right-leaning ones. And if we don't pick a neutral consultant, we're going to end up with the same mess that we've had for the last 40 years that I've been in California. We voted for this commission so that we could have citizens represented to help us be represented by real people. I mean, you look at like Allison Huber's area, and that's what they're talking about. I mean, she's got an area in Elk Grove that's only 4 blocks wide, so so they can put her in that district. That's the kind of stuff that the citizens of California are trying to avoid. And by hiring a consultancy that's biased, are we going to get that as the people? That's my concern. What I'm asking for, and it's probably not going to happen based on what I'm reading, but I'm asking that the commission do what was voted for, and that is align California for the people of California, not for the consultancies of California. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Any other member of the public who wishes to speak again on non-agendized items? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Carrie Wilson. I am a registered Republican, and I work in Fresno County and live in Madera County. And I have concerns about the contractor, the contractor choices. It's a bipartisan team, and there should be a bipartisan consulting firm that is selected. And there, as has been previously stated, some extreme right, some extreme left consulting firms that have been selected, and I do wish that this is seriously considered because California has a population that is that is a wide variety of people with their own individual issues, and I do believe that the working class should not be ostracized by picking a consulting firm that would like to draw lines that would be most convenient to some of the extreme politics that are going on against the lower and middle class nationwide. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you do make a decision that represents the most population of California and not the elitist few.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Good morning. My name is Terry Howard. I live in Ventura County. I'm a registered Republican. And what I'm asking this committee to consider is do not bifurcate our relationship with the people who serve us in our community. We saw this before. We had relationships before with our elected officials. Relationships meaning that we knew who to go to. They would help us if they could. We knew the system in our work areas. We knew the system in our living areas. And the last time you redistricted, not you in this room, but whoever was responsible, we all got a divorce. In my area, we changed leadership. I had no relationship. My kids had no relationship. The schools had no relationship. We had to reform everything. So please consider, you're bifurcating us. You're bifurcating the people who wanted this proposition to happen. That's not what we had in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Any other member of the public who wishes to speak on non-agendized items?
Hi, my name is Denise Nielsen, and I live in the Santa Rosa Valley, which is an unincorporated area of Ventura County. Until recently, when the United States Postal Service changed us to Santa Rosa Valley, we were actually a mailing address Camarillo. And I have 7 children, and I can testify to you to the community integrity of both Simi Valley and Thousand Oaks in the lives of those of us in Ventura County, because most of my kids have gone to school in Thousand Oaks. I have a daughter in the Moore Park Unified School District going to the high school at Moore Park College. I have a daughter who goes to the cheerleading gym in Simi Valley. So we all have so many ties to each other, and it is definitely a different situation than in the San Fernando Valley. As Peggy said, the Los Angeles Unified School District does not extend to us, and it's just a very different circumstance. So I hope that you take that into consideration when you're drawing the redistricting lines, because I feel that our representatives need to understand the quality of life that we have. I think that most of us live in Ventura County because we have concrete aversion. And I think that we would like to keep the kind of rural and the kind of community feel that we have. So I feel that if you draw the lines and manage to make it where Simi Valley and Thousand Oaks are both still a part of the area that we live in, as far as our elected representatives, it's going to make a huge difference as far as the cohesiveness of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nielsen. Any other member of the public who wishes to address this committee on agenda today?
David Salavari from Berkeley. I got here a little bit late today, and I'm not sure if there's going to be an opportunity to speak before the full commission makes its vote about who the technical consultant
We will. So after this is an opportunity to speak on non-agendized items,
Okay.
and then immediately after that, I'm opening the mic up for any comments on the technical consultants.
Thank
So
you.
we're separating them for ease of efficiency. And
I'll wait then. Thank you.
okay. You might just sit there if there's any other member of the public who wishes to speak on matters that are not on the agenda, which today the agenda is, again, just our technical consultants. So the commission opens the mic for anybody who wishes to address other issues today. Seeing none, now is the opportunity for Ms. I said, Mr. Salavari, you could have sat there. I didn't see any other member of the public, but at this time, the mic is open for any public comments on our agendized item, which are the technical consultant bids we have received. And now, I may have a show of hands quickly for the process and procedure of who wishes to speak on this issue. Okay. Seeing that there are a number of people who wish to speak, it is the procedure of this commission that we will limit public comment to 3 minutes to provide sufficient opportunity for the majority of people here to speak. So time will be kept by Ms. Sargis, and she will advise you upon 1 minute and 30, and as well as 30-second mark. And we'd ask again for the convenience of other members who wish to address this commission that each of the members of the public commit to that 3 minutes as well, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Justin Milan on behalf of the California League of Conservation Voters. I do have a letter to submit to the Commission on behalf of our Executive Director. I want to commend you on behalf of the League of Conservation Voters for all the work and your dedication so far, and wish you well on a arduous journey, no doubt. You'll hear from many sides. I know that you'll balance it well. And we urge you to consider very, very carefully your selection. This is the first selection of a significant support for your commission. And when you actually support the technical expert, please be cognizant that it's crucially important to be aware of the communities of interest in California. California is a remarkably diverse state. We want to ensure that your choice is of an impartial staffing service that doesn't unduly influence your commission, and we look forward to working with you as you move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the Commission?
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Sandoval. I'm with the California League of United Latin American Citizens, and I'm here today to read a letter from Mickey Solorio Luna, Vice President of the Far West Region of National LULAC. Redistricting Commission members, I write to you today with the hope that strong consideration be given in protecting communities affected by the Voting Rights Act, and that the applicants selected maintain a fair, transparent, public, and nonpartisan process. As a native of California and a national officer of the largest Latino organization in the nation, the League of United Latin American Citizens, I am deeply concerned over who will play a major role in consulting the Redistricting Commission on drawing district boundaries. The process must be a fair process for all Californians and the highly populated minority communities. The California minority community played an important role in the redistricting process regarding the selection of the Citizens Commission, and now we trust that you will select the best choice and consultants who have applied for this critical role as technical experts in drawing of lines which will represent Californians. I'm aware of the past work of the Rose Institute, which clearly, in my opinion, does not represent the best interests of Latinos and the minority population. When past redistricting projects are drawn with no consideration of minority voting rights, it is a clear message that the same may be considered for California. I am strongly opposing the Rose Institute selection. Sincerely, Mickey Solorio Luna, National LULAC Vice President, Far West, California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Jonathan Tran. I'm the California Policy Advocate for the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, or CRAC for short. CRAC itself is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that advocates on the behalf of the more than 2.5 million Southeast Asian American refugees that have resettled here in the United States. This population includes individuals and families that have resettled in the United States and displaced from their homelands from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam as a result of the wars in Southeast Asia. Here in California, it is actually home to 751,000 Southeast Asian Americans and is actually the home to the largest resettlement of refugees anywhere in the world. So thus, the decisions that the Commission comes to today will have a dramatic impact on our community. So today, as the Citizen Commission deliberates on applicants for the technical consultants, CRAC encourages the Commission to consider two key points. First, the Commission must work to ensure that the contracted consultant have a demonstrated history of understanding and inclusion of ethnic minority communities. Historically, the Southeast Asian American community has either been entirely ignored as a demographic or conveniently lumped in with the larger Asian Pacific Islander community, sometimes in the other Asian category. Failure to actively include this significant population marginalizes our community's voting ability. So, for example, any analysis or report produced by the consultant regarding the Central Valley ought to include some analysis on the large Hmong and Cambodian population that live there. In fact, the Central Valley is home to the largest Hmong population in the United States. So while indeed the Central Valley's largest growing population are our Latinos brothers and sisters, Southeast Asians also represent a significant and growing demographic in the area. The second point that CRAC urges the Commission...
You have 1 minute.
Okay. The second point that CRAC urges the Commission to consider is the importance of public trust. Historically, many members of the Southeast Asian community, as a result of their experiences with war, have a general skepticism towards government entities. Thus, it is paramount that the Commission sets a strong precedent when considering and awarding contracts by seeking groups that have a record of advocating for ethnic minority communities and work to uphold and defend the Voting Rights Act.
You have 30 seconds.
I understand that the Commission has a very difficult and contentious discussion ahead. So please note that CRAC is more than committed to working with the Commission and other stakeholders to making sure to uphold the Voting Rights Act and to build on public trust as the state moves forward with the redistricting. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Tran.
Good morning. My name is Bill Wong. I'm here on behalf of the Asian American Education Institute. For the last 5 years, we've done nonpartisan voter education and outreach to Asian Pacific Americans. And shortly, we're here with concerns with regard to the Rose Institute's application on 3 general points. The first point is with regard to the contractor's record in Arizona with regard to Voting Rights Act. Secondly, with regard to some of the apparent omissions with regard to conflict. And then lastly, what appears to be a disproportionate affiliation with partisan organizations or partisan beliefs. So with regard to that, that is the basis of our opposition to their bid for the contract. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wong.
Sorry, Chair, do you want to handle disclosures after public comment is completed or after where I might know after each one or at the end?
At the end.
Okay, fine.
Prefer. I have it in my agenda, knowing...
Morning, Madam Chair. My name is Don Kilmer. I am a citizen of California. I am a Republican sitting in the middle of the 9th Assembly District, so you can understand I'm a minority. Today I'm here in opposition of the Rose Institute. As a citizen of California, it's my right to vote, regardless of where I live, regardless of my party stance. I believe it is probably the most pristine of our rights as citizens. The Rose Institute is a conservative group. They hide themselves between paper and pen, but they are a conservative group. They have stood in front of many commissions like this and have voted or have worked in opposition to the California Voters' Rights Act. As such, they are biased, and as such, they should not represent the citizens of this state as the commission's consultant to an impartial group to show the citizens of California that we can be honest and right to our citizens in designing areas of representation that are representative of the citizens of California, whether they be minorities or whether they be party ties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer.
Like that. My name is Roger Canfield. I'm here as a private citizen. I was the chief Republican consultant in the state Senate in the 1980 reapportionment. And during that period, I worked with Common Cause on reforming this process, creating Proposition 14, which lost, but many of the criteria live today in California law and the Constitution. The Commission is considering awarding a contract to Q2 Data Research, nominally headed by Karen McDonald. Note, however, that the senior partner and founder is Bruce Kane. What's his record as a redistrictor? In 1981, he did the plan, the Democrat plan, which went before the voters in 1982 and was resoundingly rejected, 62 to 38%. According to Kane's own book, The Reapportionment Puzzle, editorials said a number of things. It's evident once again that controlling incumbent lawmakers that put their own best interests above those of the people. Another editorial said that the districts look like a jigsaw puzzle prepared by a capricious monkey. In 2003, he was deposed in a lawsuit involving reapportionment in San Joaquin and Santa Clara County, and he denied that what he was doing was gerrymandering, and instead he said he used the term bipartisan plan, which it was not.
You have
Moreover,
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. He said the constitutional requirement to protect the integrity of cities, counties makes no sense. As an example of his work, in the handout you have the maps, 2 maps. One's the 10th Assembly District, which stretches from downtown Sacramento to Lodi to Antioch.
You have 30 seconds.
In Contra Costa County. The second map is the 35th Assembly District, which connects the far northern community of Guadalupe in northern Santa Barbara County with Santa Paula in Ventura County. It bypasses the city of Ventura. So Mr. Bruce Kane was a partisan line drawer, and that's the firm, one of the firms that you're considering. I thank you very much. I am thrilled that this commission exists, having worked on these issues some decades ago.
Thank you, Mr. Canfield.
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 Yeah, Roger Canfield. Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, Commissioners, good morning. My name is Scott Dosick. I'm a Sacramento resident. And I'm pleased to see this effort underway, as I did vote for the formation of this commission. And one only has to spend a little bit of time in this building, especially over the last few budget cycles, to see the need for this commission to do a stellar job. In reviewing the documents online related to the line drawing, I have a concern related to one of the bidders. The Rose Institute did not seem to provide the information required by this commission with regards to financial disclosure and conflict of interest. And I look specifically at the form. I don't think I need to spend the time reading it, but you're very familiar with the requirements that are in here. So I'll save time and not repeat it. While I do currently work in the private sector, I have my own small business, I did work over 12 years for both the state of California and for the federal government, overseeing numerous contract and grant programs. I learned early on that there is a reason RFPs are structured so carefully. It's based on the lessons that we have learned. How can you trust a bidder to perform the work in the manner needed when they fail to comply with the basic RFP submittal requirements? A great deal of effort has been made to ensure a fair and balanced panel of California citizens was empowered with this process. There's too much riding on your work to allow even the appearance of non-objectivity to derail your mission. Thank you for your time and for your service to the people of California.
Thank you, Mr.
Good morning, Commission. My name is Matt Rexrode, and I will, in an effort of full disclosure, confess my jealousy for you all in terms of being involved in this process. I'm one of a few people who's passionate about redistricting and very involved in this, and you all get to be involved in this. And under the drafting of Prop 11 and the follow-on measure that brought congressional districts into this process, I would have guessed that I would have been excluded because I'm a Republican political consultant as well as a Yolo County supervisor. I represent Woodland. And in going through this process, I actually called over a year ago, the conflict that you have today, because there's so few people who are involved in redistricting. It's a very limited group of people who are very involved in this process, and you're about to be kind of welcomed into that very small number of people. Now, notice that this is such an important process, yet we have very few people in the audience today who are actually looking at this. Now, maybe lots of people are looking at it online, but this has generally been an insider's ballgame for a long time. The effort of the ballot measure that Mr. Munger worked so hard to pass, along with a lot of the rest of us, was to bring that open into the public, yet few people are actually involved in playing a role in that. I would have loved to apply to have been your line drawer and be one of the people considered today, but I would have assumed under the way Prop 11 was drafted that I would have been excluded because I run Republican political campaigns. I don't know how in the world that you can take a look at all of the information that's come out about the Rose Institute and Q2 strategies, or Q2, whatever it is, and not conclude that both of them have some sort of problem in this process. And that's because there's so few people that have been involved in this in the past. Everyone's going to get scars and bruises and conflicts and problems over the course of a career in redistricting. That kind of happens in the process. When you put lines on maps, you end up with conflicts. And that's kind of what happens. I watched yesterday and over the past few days as you debated about your about choosing which law firm to help you through this process. And I can't imagine that you can't look at some of these different applications for your line drawer and have exactly the same objections. Those of you, thank you. For those of you who are objecting so strenuously to Nielsen Merksimer, a lot of that same standard applies to both of your applicants here today. It's part of the process, and I guess we can debate that, and you're going to go through the facts and look at it. What I would encourage you to do is, this is a premier consulting opportunity for those people who are involved. It is the flagship of redistricting in this country. It's California. It's a big deal. Voting Rights Act implications are enormous. Use your ability to negotiate with these folks and force them both to the table and have them work together.
30 seconds.
They're both flawed, but I think if you work with them together, that's better to have a bipartisan approach than have one uniquely designated to do that, where the perception is exactly what Prop 11 was created to do, which is that you're favoring one political intergroup over another. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rexroth.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Don Gibson, and I'm here on behalf of Jess Dufree, Chair of the California Democratic Party's Redistricting Subcommittee, and the San Diego Democratic Party, who could not be here today. In 2004, in an op-ed, Douglas Johnson wrote, "The second ingredient for effective reform is the selection of trustworthy persons to draw lines." I strongly agree with Johnson's assessment, and for that reason I urge you to reject the application of Johnson and the Rose Institute to serve as your technical consultant. No matter what the Rose Institute may claim in their application, their history as a Republican-leaning organization is a matter of public record. In 2010, Santa Maria Times article noted Rose Institute advises Republicans on redistricting. In 2002, the Sacramento Bee described Rose as the conservative Rose Institute. In 2000, the Los Angeles Times called Rose the Republican-oriented Rose Institute. In 1991, the California Journal reported that Rose was a group used by Republicans and largely shunned by Democrats. In 2003, the then director of Rose said, "We have a reputation for being conservative." The Rose Institute has had an opportunity to repudiate this historical record of partisanship. The Commission has required applicants to disclose the services they have performed for any political party, interest group, or other entity that has supported, donated money to, raised money for a candidate for public office, taken a position on a ballot initiative, or sought to influence the redistricting process. It further requires that bidders disclose any donations or funding from any source that are used to support its operation. The Rose Institute has outright refused to give the required information. They've responded with the vague comment that the Institute has no partisan connections or political advocacy roles that present a conflict and for proposed work for the Commission, and none of these funding sources represent any conflict with the Institute's proposed work for the Commission. The right to make determinations about whether a conflict exists belongs to the Commission and the Commission alone. The Commission does not have the information to determine whether Rose's past work and funding represents a conflict because Rose refuses to disclose them. Given the documented public reputation for a partisan bias, this refusal represents grounds for rejection for their application. Further, the Republican ties to the Rose application extend beyond the organization to the individual members of their proposed team. Of the 10 members that we could verify are registered in California, our record
30
shows
seconds.
that 7 are registered Republicans: Douglas Johnson, Andrew Bush, Kenneth Miller, Florence Adams, Bipasa Nadon, Justin Levitt, Emily McNabb. Indeed, the top 5 members of the Rose are all Republicans. In Florida, Douglas Johnson, in his private business, National Demographics, consulted with the Republican-dominated Florida State Senate, and in that state, Democrats outnumber Republicans by 5%, and the state Senate is more than 2-to-1 Republican. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
Good morning, Commissioner. My name is Ron Nearing. I'm the chairman of the California Republican Party, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today. We supported the creation of this commission, and very pleased to see the work that you're embarking upon as you move forward with the mandate set forth by the people. I'm also a former state government official and spent many times sitting in conference rooms like this, and so you have my great sympathy for the amount of time you're putting in. I'm coming before you today out of concern over the firm Q2. I'm sure there's a big shock there, but I'm particularly concerned that the firm has not responded to the disclosure of Bruce Kane as an owner and manager of the company in the Secretary of State records. This association with a partisan Democrat who's been responsible for the 1981 gerrymander and defended the 2001 gerrymander should be more disqualifying than any of the allegations yesterday about any one of the attorneys, voting rights attorneys' lobbying activities. Q2 has never disavowed the connection with Kane, never taken any steps to firewall him or severed his ownership or manager connections that we're aware of. We're curious as to why has the Commission refused to demand this or disqualify Q2, and I'd like to provide you with a copy of the Secretary of State's corporate filing records, which indicates the affiliation here with a highly partisan Democrat official. I take note of the previous speakers stepping forward and raising issues concerning the Rose Institute. Total shocker that there's no reference whatsoever to the very partisan affiliation of the Q2 firm. And I think the combination of this would suggest that perhaps the Commission's best approach would be, rather than try to hire a firm and pretend it's nonpartisan, to recognize that, as Mr. Rexroad testified earlier, that there are very few individuals involved with this particular issue who do not have a partisan affiliation one way or another or past partisan activity. Therefore, perhaps the best approach would be a bipartisan approach where two firms are retained to peer review, to keep checks on one another, and so that you're having both sides represented over the course of your deliberations. This is a very, very important decision. This decision will have a direct impact on how the Commission's ultimate results are viewed, and we believe that as a practical matter, that hiring two firms with different affiliations and backgrounds is the best way to go, and we would urge you to consider that moving forward. Thank you again for your service. We commend you for the time and effort you're putting into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neri.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm Harmeet Dillon, a civil rights attorney in San Francisco and an attorney who practices the area of right or fair procedure in the political context. This commission has refused to answer why it changed its pivotal bid qualification standards for the line drawing consultant on March 9th, 10 days after originally posting the application and 5 days before the bids were due. This action gives strong grounds for a bid protest. In the interest of complete transparency, the commission and staff needs to explain who did this. Did the Commission do this? If so, they may have violated the Bagley-Keene Act, since no publicly noticed meeting took place between March 1st and March 9th. If they didn't, then your staff must have done it. The sole reason offered by this for this by your executive director was that, quote, none of the applicants had changed. None of the applicants had objected. If none objected, why was it changed? This explanation is completely disingenuous. With due respect, the conduct of the Commission has the appearance of bid rigging to enable Q2, which didn't meet the MSA redistricting experience standards to qualify for the bid. In the interest of complete transparency as a citizen, I urge the Commission and staff to answer these important questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dillon.
Good morning. My name is Charu Kopkar. I'm a citizen of Sacramento County. The California Public Interest Research Group this week gave California a D+ for government transparency. It's also important to note it's Sunshine Week in California. As someone who believes deeply in government transparency, I'm disturbed by the Rose Institute's lack of disclosure in their application. They claim they cannot produce a donor list to provide any examples of potential conflict of interest, but then cavalierly state that there is no conflict. So it should be noted that in this time when trust in government is at probably a record low, entering into agreements with associations that don't disclose is probably a very bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public who wishes to address the Commission on our bid process today?
Good morning. I'm Robert Rubin. I'm the director of the California Voting Rights Institute at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in San Francisco, and have worked quite a bit with both your applicants. Starting with Doug Johnson, he was representing the Madera Unified School District in a California Voting Rights Act case, in which an injunction was issued against an election going forward because of its violation of the California Voting Rights Act. The school district ultimately agreed to convert its system from at-large to district system, and in the process, Mr. Johnson was entrusted with drawing of the lines. Needless to say, before those lines were final, they required substantial revision before they were signed off on. And I think that was an example of perhaps seeing things from one side, which his 30 consultancies listed on his resume indicate that not a single one was on behalf of anyone seeking to enforce Voting Rights Act protections, but simply in defense of them. On the other hand, I've also worked with Karen McDonald and Q2, and I think perhaps the best example of their nonpartisanship, other than the fact that they conduct and are the repository for the statewide databases, as the Commission well knows, is a case involving the Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital District. In this case, which actually wasn't filed, but it was negotiated, the hospital district and myself, on behalf of the plaintiffs, agreed to go to a neutral mediator, a neutral
1 minute.
A mutually agreed upon demographer to tell us whether or not there was racially polarized voting. And the parties would then agree to go along with what was agreed to. And so in a sign, I believe, of the belief and perception and reality that Q2 is nonpartisan
30 seconds.
And does not reflect any particular view, both sides, the plaintiff side on behalf of voter protection and the governmental entity side on behalf of the jurisdiction, agreed to Q2 being that entity. And I think that reflected a trust that I think this Commission ought to have in the nonpartisan nature of Q2's approach to its business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Bidders may speak, as far as I understand the process. Later? Okay. Staff recommends later, given this complex process and procedure. Thank you. Any other members of the public who wish to address the commission?
Hello, Commission. David Saliveri from Berkeley again. As a conservative, as a Republican, what I want is a fair fight. And I'm afraid that we're not going to get that. I'm here because I'm really concerned that the institutional left, with its powerful, entrenched alphabet groups, will end up gerrymandering California all over again by driving a freight train through this commission. That would be worse than the political gerrymandering that's gone on in the past. Personnel is policy. Yesterday, you guys made the decision after Nielsen basically fell on its sword to do you a service. You were able to make a unanimous vote for Gibson Dunn. And so therefore, in my uninformed political opinion, I would say that the left and the liberals have won one. I would suggest that to whatever extent is possible, you guys do some political horse trading and think about what the perception will be if Corinne McDonald and Q2 end up winning as your redistricting consultant. What's going to happen from the perspective of the right and conservatives in California is the process is tainted from the beginning. And that will create a political firestorm that will come back to bite everybody in the rear at the end of this whole process. I don't want to end up here. I don't want this to end up being perceived as a class of 6-year-olds in kindergarten who, when the teacher leaves, can't get along. I don't want the teacher in the form of the lawyers at the end of this process, the special masters, to have to come back, spank everybody, and make it right. So I'm hoping that you will make the wise decision, which would be to go with the Rose Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saliveri.
Good morning, Commissioners. Joshua Golko with the California School Employees Association. I guess of the alphabet, we only take up the letters C, S, E, and A, so the rest can speak for themselves. I'm not a train conductor. I represent roughly 200,000 school bus drivers, custodians, food service workers, and other classified employees that work in our schools. They look a lot like California looks, and that's who they are. And they are concerned about this process. We've heard about the partisan leanings of the Rose Institute, so I won't get into those again, and those are also covered in our letter. We've heard about some of the issues they've faced in Arizona, in Florida, and in California. Those are all of a concern. But we're really concerned about the transparency issues with the Rose Institute. Trust me, I would have liked nothing more than to walk up here with a giant stack of papers, or one paper like Mr. Naring did, detailing the Rose Institute's donors, who they've done work for, and others. But we can't do that because they didn't disclose it like they were supposed to in their bid. They decided that that wasn't information that you were entitled to and that the public's not entitled to, despite their efforts to do work for this commission and for California. And that concerns us. In their own bid, they state that they receive literally thousands of donations, totaling millions of dollars every year. We think that this commission and California should know who those donations come from. They also say that they have a long history of research for hundreds of entities. We would like to know who those entities are and what interests they represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public who wish to address this commission on our technical consulting bids that are on the agenda today? Seeing none? Nobody? Okay. Then we'll bring it back. At this time, I think...
I just want some real quick.
I was going to get to disclosures. I was going to ask any commission member. we feel it's very important for the members of the public as well as fellow commission members to make any disclosures regarding their affiliations, relationships, et cetera, with any members of the public who have approached this commission. I'd like to turn over to Mr. Anchetta.
And very brief and very minimal. Just two speakers. Bill Wong. Mr. Wong has been very active in Asian American issues in Southern California and Northern California. I think we've known each other for a long time. We haven't worked really closely together since the 90s, I would think, in terms of that relationship. I mentioned in a previous meeting Mr. Robert Rubin. Again, we've done a lot of work together on immigrant rights activities. We served on a board together in the mid-90s, but really haven't worked at all together, I think, in the last 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Anchetta. Any other commission member who wish to disclose any affiliations or relationships with the members of the public that have spoken today? Seeing none. At this time, each commission member has been provided a folder of public comments on the prospective technical expert for drawing line districts. It's my understanding all of these public comments in the folder have been posted online, as well as all of the evaluation team results. In consultation with staff, and in accordance with the bid process and procedure, the submission for public comment on the bids closed at 1 o'clock yesterday. Mr. Claypool has made, if you can provide further clarification to the members of the public as well as the commission as to what's contained in this folder and staff's recommendation on the procedure that we use at this point for review of this additional information.
Thank you, Chairman. What we have in this folder is the staff evaluation for each of the two bids that we received. You'll find them separated. Q2 is the first evaluation. The second evaluation in the second half is for the Rose Institute. Behind each of the pages, or each of the staff evaluations, there are the public comments that were received through 1 o'clock yesterday, which was our cutoff period for both for and in support of each of the two bidders, and then the public information that was deemed to be against each of the bidders. And then finally, at the very back, are all the, behind the purple page or pink page, whatever, my colors are off, are all the general comments that spoke to the process but did not identify a comment about a particular bidder. All of these comments, because of the volume of these, we do not have printed for the public all of the comments. Those have been available on our website, and the comments since 1 o'clock continue to be on our website, but are not, or been posted up, but are not in this package. So that's the sum total. The bids themselves, the evaluation team bid or results are provided in the lobby. We provided copies to the public and are posted on our website.
And given the fact that some commission members that some of these public comments are only recently being provided to us today, is that right?
Well, in fact, yes. This is the first opportunity this commission has had to see this document, and unless you were going into the comments, and checking them, this is their first opportunity to see this this document. The
evaluation team results, and so the recommendation is that the commission members take an opportunity, and this is going to be a tedious process, and I beg pardon of the members of the public that this again is open, transparent, and confirmation of no Begley-Keene violations, that this is the first opportunity the commission members have been provided to review the evaluations of staff. So we are asking that each commission member take this opportunity now to review the information that has been submitted to us from staff. Is that correct?
That is correct. The one other thing that we might offer is Marion Johnston in conjunction with our chief counsel, and she is one of our counsel, could provide just a brief overview very quickly of what we discussed yesterday for the members of the public that didn't hear that presentation, and to refresh the commission. If we could provide that, it can be brief.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston.
Thank you. What we have done is to take the 2 bids that were received and go through the evaluation checklist that had been posted online. And we went page by page, looking only at the bid itself, with the addition of checking out the references that were provided by each of the bidders. So what your first job today is to determine whether or not the bids are responsive to the information for bid, the invitation for bid. We have given our best shot at it and pointed out where we see deviations, but it's ultimately up to you to decide if there are deviations, and if so, if they're any significant in deciding whether or not a bidder is responsive, meaning that it's met the conditions set out in the bid.
So at this time, the commission will read this material, and then the process and procedure is to then have staff go through and highlight the and break down the bid process for us as far as going through the responsiveness and then looking at the cost.
Well, the second step then, if you decide that the bids are responsive, is to open up the cost for each bid. Okay. And then to beginning with the lowest of those, to look and see whether they are a responsible bidder, which has more to do with the public comment and your perception of whether or not they will act according to your wishes in doing their work.
Okay. And just as a matter of procedure, Mr. Miller, would you suggest that we're still in open session while we're reading these documents, or?
I think I'd look at it this way. If you want to preserve the opportunity to ask questions of one another or the staff during the time you're reading, then you do need to remain in open session. If we think of it more as library time, where people are studying the documents individually and don't wish to have that kind of colloquy, you could do that at a break.
Do any commission members have any recommendations on their thoughts on this procedure?
Madam Chair, I'm wondering if we could have some library time at the beginning and then reconvene with the opportunity to bring our questions back to staff and to bidders.
Given the volume, do they have a recommendation? We're talking 1 hour, as I've heard the recommendation would be. It is now 10 after 10. Excuse me, Commissioner Ward.
Yes, I just was going to ask if we were going to allow the bidders to speak as members of the public before we begin that process.
Excuse me, pardon me. We'll do that. Again, I appreciate your patience. This is a new procedure for us, and we haven't conducted. We are going to provide an opportunity to Mr. Johnson and Ms. McDonald at this point before consideration of staff's evaluation process to address the commission for 5 minutes each. Mr. Johnson? Thereafter, we will then consider the 1 hour library time, as council's called it. So.
Chairwoman Filkins-Weber, members of the Commission, my name is Douglas Johnson, and the NCA is wrong. The partisan tempest of letters and comments recently submitted to this Commission represent the real March Madness. The Rose Institute has more experience in nonpartisan public redistricting than anyone else. In the mid-sized town of Menifee, the public submitted 35 redistricting plans drawn using our toolkit. Imagine what we can do for you statewide. Are we diverse and nonpartisan? Yes. When the Rose Institute supported the first ever statewide Latino effort to influence redistricting, the Californians for Fair Representation in 1981, was that partisan? No, obviously not. When at the Rose Institute, I helped the Congress on Racial Equality, or CORE, draw the only change to the Special Master's Plan in 1991 that the state Supreme Court accepted, Was that partisan? Obviously not. Am I an academic who happens to be registered with the Republican Party? Yes. I registered with the party because I wanted to participate in this state's elections. Not only the general elections, but in the state's, unfortunately, closed primary elections. Did I work for a Republican member of Congress 14 years ago? Yes. Was he a pro-choice, pro-gun control educator who spent 18 years as president of Cal State Long Beach? Yes. Was he as close to a nonpartisan as one can get in Congress? Yes. Is the Rose Institute nonpartisan? Yes. The Democratic Speaker of the Assembly from 2001 is a member of the Rose Institute Board of Governors. Former Assembly Speaker, now Mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, praised the Rose Institute's work as, quote, internationally recognized. From Arizona, Democratic Commissioner Hall wrote to you that throughout the process, Doug was impartial and unbiased.
1 minute.
I thought I had 5 minutes.
I'm saying you have 5 minutes.
I apologize.
That's good. It's timed. So he had a unique ability to synthesize that which is very complicated and make it very understandable for the public. Who do you think is more believable? Democratic Commissioner Hall, Speaker Hertzberg, and Mayor Villaraigosa, or partisans writing whatever they think will influence you in the heat of the moment? On the issue of working for local governments, some have told you that anyone willing to offer advice to Madera, Modesto, or Compton somehow does not respect the Voting Rights Act. I am insulted. There is no stronger advocate of fairness, opportunity, and voting rights for each and every American. I have great respect for the NAACP, MALDEF, the Asian Pacific Legal Center, and the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. Their work undeniably has changed our society for the better. Since 2001, California Voting Rights Act lawsuits have forced or influenced 5 jurisdictions to change to district elections. My work has led to over 20 jurisdictions to change from at-large to district elections with the goal of improving Latino opportunities to elect candidates of their choice. 20 versus 5. The system needs plaintiffs, undeniably, but it also needs those willing to work with the jurisdictions who want to study the law and do what the law says. And, by the way, every one of those jurisdictions is nonpartisan. This commission has talked about its ability to hire the expertise it needs. Your lawyers are very smart people, but they have never worked for a Section 5 jurisdiction. Q2 are also very smart professional people, but they have no experience redistricting jurisdictions under Section 5. This commission has only one option if it wants to hire anyone who has ever worked on a preclearance filing, the Rose Institute team.
1 minute.
Thank you. Redistricting a state and public is a big project. We've done it before, we know. Can the Rose Institute handle it professionally, fairly, and by ourselves? Yes. Will there be controversy if the commission hires only Rose or only Q2? Obviously. I ask you today to endorse the Rose Institute proposal before you. But if you so direct, we are happy to sit down with Q2 and come to you with a team approach. As we will when drawing the lines,
30 seconds.
The Rose Institute is here to offer you options, and the decision is up to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, it's the one that went around.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Ms. McDonald.
I brought a couple of letters that I want to make sure you received. We submitted them a couple of days ago, and they weren't posted yesterday as of 1 o'clock, so I'm just passing them out. And there's also enough copies for the public. So thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. It's nice to see all of you this early morning in Sacramento. So I would like to address a few points that have been raised about me in the public comments and, also by speakers. So let me start by the continuing claims that I am a Democrat. I am just not a Democrat. I really am not. I'm a declined to state voter. I am not a political person. I I don't know. There's only so often one can say that you're just not a Democrat. Decline to state people just don't have the opportunity to go to the decline to state convention or, something like that and then say, okay, here is my evidence. I went to this convention and I was a part of that team, but there's just no such thing. So I continue to say I'm not a Democrat. My politics really are about access for people with dogs to public places. And I wish I'd have a little more time for it, but that is really what it is. And I think that's a nonpartisan issue. I believe that. And then people have said that it's really not about me and about my partisanship. It really is about Bruce Kane. Now, that irks me a little bit because he's just really not on the proposal. And yes, it's true. Bruce Kane is the PI, the principal investigator of the statewide database at UC Berkeley. And that is because every project at UC has to have a principal investigator. And Bruce was the one who took this project on long before I was hired. So that is just, it is what it is. But Bruce is not at UC Berkeley. He lives in D.C. He works in D.C. He has nothing to do with this proposal. This proposal is written by 7 women and 1 computer guy. And, if I go home and I tell 7 women that these claims have been made, that we need a guy who is in D.C., whose interests are in D.C., to influence or supervise our work, I'm not going to go home in one piece. So, that may be something that Bruce would dream of, that he can supervise 7 women and tell them what to do, but it doesn't happen. And really, he hasn't had anything to do with anything other than one project, which is the United States Election Assistance Commission project we did on overseas military voters 5-something years ago. And that is when we formed Q2, and because we did this project together, Bruce is a minority partner of Q2. I can tell you that I do everything on Q2. I'm the manager of Q2, and he has nothing to do with it. So, and we really don't want him to do anything, to have anything to do with this either. This whole experience has been a little bit like living in the twilight zone for me, because I've run a nonpartisan shop at Berkeley, and especially the members of our Republican board at the statewide database just used to love me, and they did until at Claremont somebody came up apparently and said, I am a Democrat all of a sudden. So I'm not a Democrat, again, one more time. And I also never thought that I would sit here and say, in response to claims made about me by the chair of the Republican Party, I am flattered. I have to say that the chair of the Republican Party feels like he has to, comment on something that I'm doing. But and I actually wanted to thank him because I could have done a better job on my CV highlighting some issues about our statewide work. So let me just say something about pre-clearance and about statewide work. You will see on multiple members of our team's resume that we've done work on a project that is called Competition and Redistricting in California, Lessons for Reform, and the Implications of Nesting in California Redistricting. And both of those projects, I set up the entire methodology for statewide redistricting. I implemented the project. I supervised absolutely every aspect of it. So there were 2 statewide projects in which multiple plans were drawn, looking at all different criteria. They were looking for criteria interactions. We were drawing voting rights districts, and we were looking at what happens when you prioritize one criterion over the other. And I think at least a couple of commissioners here have read those papers. They're on the statewide database website. Okay. And also, one member of our team actually used to supervise or used to work on pre-clearance at the voting rights at the Department of Justice in the voting rights section. So Anna Henderson has been working on Section 5. She also has statewide experience on multiple levels. So I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them, and I hope I was responsive in the bit to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Mr. Miller wishes to address the Commission.
Just very briefly, yesterday at the conclusion of the meeting, you requested us to prepare a resolution thanking Marguerite Leone for the proposal they provided. In retrospect, we thought that a letter seem to work better than a resolution, and have prepared a draft letter for the chair to send on behalf of the commission. If you'd like, I can read the letter or just give it to you to... would you like me to read the...
Do the other commissioners wish to hear it at this point? It was probably brief, and we could do that, and then we'll be taking our recess. Please, Mr.
Whatever.
Please.
Here's what we would propose to say. Perhaps it's nice to read it publicly. On behalf of the Citizens Redistricting Commission, I have been unanimously requested to offer our appreciation for the thorough and thoughtful presentation you prepared in connection with the Search for Voting Rights Act Council. Your extensive experience, personal presence, and record as a seasoned professional in voting rights matters are beyond reproach. The proposal you submitted set a high standard, and the Commission is pleased and grateful that your firm elected to be part of our process. In particular, the Commission also recognizes and is thankful for the gracious actions your firm took that made resolution of the selection process possible. Selfless acts for the benefit of the greater public good are not commonplace, and we certainly saw an example of that in your elegant closing statement to the Commission. Please accept our gratitude for your support of this process.
Thank you. At this time, the Commission will go into recess for, it's almost 10:30. We will return at 11:30, and during this time, for the members of the public, the Commission will be reading the evaluation team results that we have received from staff regarding our technical consultants. We will return at 11:30 to resume our review of the consulting reports, or consultants. Thank you. Okay, we are back on the record. Following our recess march again for myself, this higher complex process. As discussed yesterday, and our executive director, Mr. Claypool, went through, this is a two-part process, and this first process is an opportunity in which we have just done for the full commission to review staff's notes and to determine whether there have been any deviations documented by staff as to whether or from the actual bid, and whether any of those deviations that might be noted constitute material deviations such to warrant that they would not pass, and in other words, they would fail their response to the bid process. If I'm doing anything.
Exactly correct.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, make sure I'm reiterating it for myself and again for the members of the public that are tuning in and that are here as well, so that we can follow this this process. As everyone is well aware, we have two candidates, and in that regard, for the purposes of ease of time, we will look at, as it is presented to us in our packet, we will start with Q2 and Data Research LLC. In that regard, staff, Ms. Johnston, did you want to go through that? It's my understanding we will at this point, determine where in the evaluation that staff has noted for consideration of the Commission anything that may not have been responsive to the request for bid or the invitation for bid.
And as we note on page 13 of our evaluation, we did not find any deviations or errors to report to you. But I'll be happy to go through the whole evaluation if you wish.
Does anyone have any questions regarding staff's evaluation of Q2? And, sorry.
Perhaps it would be advantageous to just briefly go through have Ms. Johnston go through the entire Q2 evaluation so that you can see where the information came from and if you have any questions.
Thank you. That would be helpful. Ms. Johnston.
Okay, and Raul will also chime in as he has things to add. Beginning on page 4, as far as the
excuse me, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnston. We have obviously their bid, and I'm assuming that you're going to go back and forth. Are you referring to page 4 of the evaluation?
Page 4 of our evaluation.
Thank you.
As to the requirements of how the bid was to be presented to us, we found that there was no deviation from what you requested. We have not yet checked the cost, obviously, since that's still been closed. And we have not yet verified the cost worksheet. On the next, as to what attachments they were required to provide, it did make our task substantially easier that they actually tabbed the attachments. So every time we looked for an attachment, we could go to their binder and find where the attachment was included. And in fact, they did include all the required attachments. And to note for the Commission, one they are not required to include but may include is attachment G, finding that they are a small business preference. And as we'll note later, we did verify that they are entitled to that preference as a small business. On L.
I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, could you, for some of us who are not, the small business preference, is that something that's a government?
It's a state of California requirement that it's a, Raul can probably explain it better.
To gain a small business preference, you actually have to go and apply for it. There's a process. When the bid was submitted, along with it was the information from the Department of General Services indicating that application had been accomplished and approved by the Department of General Services. And so we went back after that and verified that it was part of the record.
So what does that mean?
It's a 5% or $50,000, whichever is less.
So in other words, if the monetary bids were the same, the small business would get a preference of consideration for the lowest bid because it will go down 5%.
5% or 50,000? Whichever is greater?
No, 5% of the total bid.
No,
I thought you said 5% or 50,000.
no, it's 5% of the lowest bid. So if Q2 is the lowest bid, it becomes moot. If Rose is the lowest bid, then at that point, you would evaluate the 5% consideration.
Thank you.
Is there a microphone also?
It wouldn't apply with you.
Okay.
And
and then
L.
Bill was going to evaluate,
Yes.
find the general services.
Right. If you look at L, the contractor evaluation, we were able...
7.
On page 7, we were able to accomplish that also, and so that was verified, that no negative STD4 contractor evaluation had been filed for Q2.
In the next section, the bid requirements checklist was mostly provided by their answers to their scope of work section. And again, we went through each of the requirements and found that the material they provided satisfied all the requirements in the request for the bid. Again, without nothing as to the costs. Probably what the Commission may like to look at the most are the Attachment E documents on page 14 of our evaluation, which do with the projects. We asked them to provide projects where they had provided redistricting services. And here they did give us the information first as to the City of San Diego with a start date and an end date, which was within the 20 years as you had specified, and what the population was of San Diego. The second project they gave was San Francisco, and again, the start and end date was within the last 20 years, and again, the population diversity. You had set out a requirement that they provide references that fell within certain guidelines, and as two of your suggested guidelines were San Diego and San Francisco, it wasn't hard to conclude that they met that requirement. Now, to describe the contractor's role in their documents themselves, and I should say here, the document that we put in our yes/no answers all came from the bid itself. Later on, we have comments that we received from the references, so they may or may not coordinate, so we've listed them separately.
And again, just for the public's reference and following along, you're on page 16 of your evaluation of Q2.
Right.
Thank you.
Neither of the two projects that they did were subject to the Section 5 analysis. They did not require pre-clearance. They did do Section 2 analysis on each of those projects. They did one for San Francisco, the second project, and the analysis showed that Section 2 was not applicable, but they still did the analysis. Then we contacted their two references, and again, this was a joint project where Raul and I were both on the phone and asking questions and making notes. And so what this is a compilation of our notes from our telephone conversations with the two references. Mr. Saito was the redistricting vice chair when San Diego did its redistricting. He verified the information they'd provided as to that Q2 was the contractor and did provide the work as specified.
One thing of note, when we were having the conversations, the primary questions we asked are the ones that you see here.
Sometimes they gave us other information as well, which we also noted. They provided kits for the public, allowing the public to participate in the process and understand redistricting and even draw their own maps. They drew alternative maps for the commission in order to allow the commission to evaluate different alternatives. And Mr. Saito verified that Section 2 was a particular concern in San Diego, and that the work provided by Q2 did perform that analysis, and that the Q2 analysis was used in identifying populations of interest and where the line should be drawn. Again, I say that Section 5 was not applicable to San Diego. As to their contact between Q2 and the public, the agency, they found, again, Q2 is very important and helpful to the Commission. One time the Commission faced an emergency where Q2 stepped in and helped to keep things going. Frequently they met late into the night, and Mr. Saito was quite praising of their helpful professional attitude towards dealing with the public and dealing with the Commission and dealing with staff. They kept the data confidential, and their database was sufficient to allow them to meet their needs. The second person we contacted was the Redistricting Commission of San Francisco, a member of that commission, Quentin Mecki. Again, he verified the data that they provided. One problem is that Q2 was not, their time was shortened that San Francisco had because an election was moved up. And so they had a much shorter time than they had anticipated to do the line drawing. And Q2 was very helpful, working around the clock, as he described it, to meet the time frame that they were required to satisfy. They prepared multiple scenarios for the Commission so they could evaluate different approaches. He confirmed that they did do the Section 2 analysis, even though they found that San Francisco was not required to do anything subject to Section 2. Again, that they were very helpful to meeting the deadlines. As to the personnel, they did provide resumes of the people and identified what roles those people were going to provide if you accepted their bid. Among those people, if they had experience in all the required areas of knowledge, we go through for each of the resumes provided, showing what that person's background was, what the title will be, what the history had been. Karen McDonald had not had litigation, not been involved in litigation. But there are others who do have that experience. Anna Henderson, as shown by her resume, did work with the Department of Justice Voting Rights Section and had done considerable Title II and Section 2 and Section 5 work. They had a person responsible for coordinating public input, and that was Bonnie Glazer. One thing that we thought was interesting, I'll just call to your attention, was that they proposed having regional coordinators to divide California into sections and have one person responsible for each area so that the people from that area could have continued contact with the same person as far as public input and develop some trust and communication lines with that person. And so they listed the 4 people that they proposed to use for that work. And then finally they identified a information technology specialist who, from his resume, has experience in security issues, IT issues, maintaining security for the database, and so forth. And that basically was our conclusion. Anything you'd like to add, Bill?
Do any of the commission members have questions of staff regarding this review of Q2?
Yes.
Commissioner Yao.
On page 23
Of the bid or our analysis?
of the package we've been looking at, the analysis,
Uh-huh.
the list of item A through H under the heading resume must specify project experience illustrated that the contractor staff, and all contractor, subcontractor have knowledge and or expertise in the following areas.
Right.
This list
It was part of the bid.
came from the statement of work?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you determine as to whether it's a yes or no? Does everybody on the staff have to have that kind of knowledge?
No.
One person has to have that knowledge?
And what we did is there was narrative within the bid itself as well as going into the resumes. So we looked in both places.
So if one person has that knowledge, then that would justify a yes?
Yes.
Correct. That was the requirement.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? So procedurally, at this point, it's my understanding that we would then consider, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, that the commission must make a determination of whether, based on the analysis provided by staff, whether they have passed the responsive portion of the bid process.
Correct, and your own review of the contract, of the proposal.
Okay. Do any commission members have any further discussion regarding the responsiveness of Q2 Data and Research LLC in response for our bid?
Just a question again regarding disclosure in terms of timing of disclosure, if we have any knowledge or former relationship with any member of, say, this particular or the other contractor, just when we would want to disclose those, or...
I suspect that would be better at the time of a vote, and as the procedure had been discussed previously at the commencement of usually our sessions, but if you'd like to proceed now, Mr. Anchetta, that would be great.
Whichever. Two individuals, or one member of Q2 who I've worked with in the past is Anna Henderson, not in her capacity at Q2, but in her capacity with the Warren Institute. She edited a book on the Voting Rights Act. I provided a chapter on that. She edited that. I have, up until about a week or two ago, and I didn't know actually that she was on Q2, I had been checking in with her occasionally to get some information regarding Voting Rights Act attorney prospects, and also just inquiries regarding a technical consultant, and again, just sort of getting information, how we might go about looking at that kind of person, and I haven't spoken to her in about a week or so, and again, I had no idea she was on the Q2 team, so that's for that. I do know one of the references, but I don't know if you want to, within the application itself, so I can...
Please, full disclosure.
Sure. So, Leland Saito, who is a professor, I've known him for many years. He did some work, I believe, or at least was studying the 1990s state redistricting, and as I mentioned in the past, I was working with Asian American organizations at the time. I can't remember if he was part of that coalition formally or he was a very careful observer at the time, but certainly we've known each other for a long time and have interacted. I haven't spoken to him in probably at least a year or so, and we don't have any sort of any kind of ongoing working relation in terms of scholarship. We may see each other at conferences and things, but that's about it.
You're anything?
Yeah, I'm done. That's it.
Commissioner Blanco.
Well, what do you think? I have not. I don't believe I've worked. I may have worked on a project with Ms. McDonald, but I know her personally, and also their election administration center is located at UC Berkeley School of Law, where the Warren Institute, that I was the director of, was also housed, and her office was down the hall from me. And I don't think we've done redistricting work together, but I'm not sure. But I know her well. Anna Henderson was my employee when I was the director of the Warren Institute. We had a program area called Opportunity and Inclusion, which covered areas of voting. We did work on tracking health disparities and issues around disparities to public park access and healthy environments, and looked at them from a legal perspective, whether those were legal violations, if there were disparities. I know, because of my acquaintance with the Election Administration Center, I know I know a couple of members of the team, not well, but I know Ms. Glazer and Ms. Boyle. And I've seen Mr. Cheng Li. We say hello in the elevator. In terms of, because the whole team was literally down, you just need to know the whole team's literally down the hall from where I used to work. I don't believe I know any of the other people involved in the team.
I have one question. Did staff, in consideration of attachment 4 regarding potential conflicts, were those confirmed, verified, this particular portion of the response to the bid?
We did not look outside what was submitted by the bidder and the references.
And the information concerning that is on what page of your evaluation?
It'd be on page 6. Item number D.
6?
Page 6 of the evaluation form. And that would be item number D. D as in David.
And it is attachment 4 in the blue binder. And we did not just take her at the word, we also reviewed the resumes to see if the resumes were consistent with the information provided in the descriptive portion.
Okay, so this is a signed statement from Ms. McDonald. So I guess my question is whether the staff has performed any further detailed analysis of the potential conflicts or received any full execution of any other staff member, or whether that was required of any other staff member of Q2.
It was not required. Our only cross-check was with the references of the staff members that were given to us. They did provide resumes for each of the staff members, and we reviewed those to verify the comments that were made.
Okay, so staff's confirmation on page 6 is also further verification that each of the staff members of Q2 have also been cleared for the conflicts of under 8252.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber, in regards to the way the IFB was delineated, when the bidder responded, they were supposed to respond in terms of themselves, the staff, the key staff that would be working on the project, as well as any contractors. And so signature to that would then be associated with complying with those directions. And that was as part of attachment 4 with the IFB.
Okay, and other than through the references, that's the only verification that was made by staff?
The resumes.
And the resumes, okay. Thank you. Any other questions from any commission member? Commissioner Parvenu.
Yes, I must be missing attachment F. But on page 2, since I'm not so proficient at state jargonese and acronyms. Can you please spell out or indicate what, I understand the small business description and that calculation, but what are some of these others, like EZA and TACPA and LAMBRA, for the record?
No, the actual IFB.
And we don't have an attachment F here, so
No, because it wasn't applicable. And if I can get a copy of the IFB, I can let you know.
Okay, well, that's a moot point, then I don't need an explanation.
It's a different kind of preference that neither one requested.
Okay, that's fine. Good enough for me.
Are there any other questions? Or any other discussion from any commission member regarding Q2 data and the first phase of their responsiveness to our invitation for bids? See none. Council, do you agree that this is an opportune time to entertain a motion for confirmation that of whether Q2 has been responsive to our bid and would therefore considered passing?
You could ask for anything from the bidder, but since we didn't come up with anything, it probably isn't necessary.
Correct. That's what I figured.
Yes.
Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I think we, at this point, I do believe we open it up for public comment on the motion that is on the floor at this time. Any members of the public who wish to address the commission on the present motion solely in the responsive, you understand, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. I need not reiterate it.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, I would encourage you to pass this motion, but I just want to point out one thing that this shows. There's a section in here where we all had to say, have we ever done any work for anyone who's ever endorsed a ballot measure? That's a part you've all heard a lot about because we responded, how on earth would we know? That is highlighted by the fact that Q2 lists that they have done work for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and then they say that no, they've never done any work for anyone that's endorsed a ballot measure. And the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights is listed on many web pages as being on the No on Prop 54 campaign. Again, I think you should pass this motion, but I point that out as an example of why in our proposal we said, how on earth would we know what everyone we've ever come into contact with has done? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any other member of the public? Please, Ms. McDonald.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, on that particular point, thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Johnson. I passed out a couple of letters earlier that didn't apparently make it onto the website by 1 o'clock yesterday. We were in error at not listing the Lawyers Committee on this particular donation. We actually thought it was there's a national organization and then there is the local organizations of the Lawyers Committees. And, you know, with apologies, we thought it was a national organization. We then found out it was the local organization, the Lawyers Committee of the Bay Area or the San Francisco Bay Area that made the donation. So we just wanted to clarify that, and I apologize. We did not mean to mislead you.
Any other member of the public who wishes to address the commission on the motion that's on the floor? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the full commission. Has it been determined by staff that this was timely submitted by Ms. McDonald regarding an apparent omission in her bid?
It was all we considered was what was submitted with the bid. We did not consider anything submitted later.
But have we confirmed that as what Ms. McDonald has confirmed is that this was not posted?
Oh, I don't.
And in other words, we are not entitled to consider new or additional information outside of the bid or the public comments beyond 1 o'clock. And the representation that's being made is that this was timely submitted, it just didn't make it on the website.
It
and I'd like
submitted in time for the bid.
I understand.
It may have been submitted in time for public comment. I don't know.
That's what, there's a balance here. So was it submitted?
I don't know what time it came in, but I can confirm that if you give me a minute.
Please.
seems to me that just putting that with our error, their error.
You could say that way.
Okay. We'll wait to see whether it's our fault or their fault. Oh, so we. Oh, and then what?
Because in their it's the bid itself. They should be considered. Corner to corner is the bid calculation.
Okay, and why did they consider to be outside the bid?
Because the bid document has submitted additional information in addition to the document itself.
Oh.
Yes. So the officers here would provide additional information.
I'm trying to download the email. It was submitted on Thursday night, so
Yes.
I'm trying to download the email.
We actually, Roel has given me some clarification on this. I'm going to let Roel explain the circumstances.
Okay. When we received that information, I brought it to the attention of the Office of Legal Services, Department of General Services, for the primary reason that typically when a bid is received, that actual document that actual document is what serves as the bid itself. Information that comes outside of that bid or outside of that document is in addition to. And so we wanted clarification on, would this be additional information to outside of the bid? And received an affirmative to that. That basically what we could evaluate and what we should look at is what was received on time by 5 o'clock as was designated by the invitation for bid.
But this is what my problem is. Please clarify this for me. This is an omission. So obviously it's not inclusive in the bid, Mr. Claypool.
You're absolutely right. Now that we know the circumstance, because that we had it, but it couldn't be included insofar as OLS is concerned, this would be a material deviation that you would have to consider as the commission as to whether or not it affects the responsiveness of the bidder. So, and I apologize for not knowing the sequence for that, but so Ms. McDonald is correct. They submitted it in time, but insofar as the Office of Legal Services was concerned, it could not be included, and that's why it was not provided.
And it may not necessarily add to the responsiveness of the bid, because obviously the information that's contained in there makes the determination of responsiveness. The question becomes whether or not the omission would then create the possibility of a conflict pursuant to 8252, which I'm reviewing. If any of the other commission members have any questions or comments regarding the issue, I'll certainly entertain them.
Okay.
So just to clarify, at this point, then noting that there had been an omission, it's our job to deliberate on whether we feel that this omission was material or not?
Well, there is a motion on the floor, yes, and obviously I think this is, and Ms. Johnson answered the question, and whether or not it may be a determinative factor for your vote on whether Q2 now will pass. That's why I'm taking the time at this point to reread 8252 and whether the omission that has now been brought to our attention was not included in the bid and whether it may impact our determination to vote in favor of this motion. So, Commissioner DiGiulio.
It's my understanding that in terms of a process, the clarification can't be considered for the bid, so therefore it's a deviation. But we can consider the response in terms of determining whether or not the bidder is responsive.
Correct.
We are allowed to take that in consideration.
You may consider clarifications not new
So
material.
we either feel that the response has provided justification for the deviation or it hasn't. That's what we're...
Correct.
Okay.
So, going to that matter, I'm trying to figure out what we're discussing here. So in the official submission, there's an attachment, number 4, that has the conflict of interest responses, conflict and impartiality statement, right? And so in this submission, at the bottom, the final item listed is the money from the Lawyers Committee of Civil Rights under the law for a racially polarized voting analysis. And is what we're discussing now that the amount and the description is the same, but the name of the organization is that different because it was the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the Bay Area as opposed to the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law? Is that the discrepancy? Not the dollar amount or the description?
So.
Is that, okay. So my question is that an omission or is that some other thing? An error. I mean, I'm just trying to clarify if that's an error or an omission.
Deviation.
It's a deviation. Okay, so that's considered a deviation but not an omission.
I would think so.
I would think so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, Commissioner DeGiulio.
So I think the issue with this was that Mr. Johnson had brought up that, and I'm forgetting the exact details, but the idea is that the national level had supported, it was a proposition?
No.
Or was it the Bay Area that had
It
supported?
said the Bay Area had supported a proposition.
So it was the Bay Area, not the national.
And she didn't identify the Bay Area. She
I just want to make
identified
sure
the national
which
instead.
one was providing support. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? I would ask for a roll call vote then. Oh, I'm sorry? Yes, please.
The motion on the floor is to consider the bid proposal from Q2 to be responsive to the IFB for redistricting services.
Roll call? Yes, it is.
Commissioner Aguirre?
Yes.
Commissioner Anchetta?
Yes.
Commissioner Baraba?
Yes.
Commissioner Blanco?
Yes.
Commissioner Dye?
Yes.
Commissioner DeGiulio?
Yes.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber?
Yes.
Commissioner Forbes?
Yes.
Commissioner Galambas-Malloy?
Yes.
Commissioner Antai? Commissioner Parvenu?
Yes.
Commissioner Raya? Commissioner Ward?
Yes.
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 Raya, yes. Commissioner Ward? Yes. Commissioner Yao?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. At this time, seeing the hour of 10 after 12 on my clock, and for the purpose of the public, we will recess. And when we return, we will go through the same process with the next bidder at 1 o'clock. Unless any other commission member has anything to bring up. Okay, staff, anything before we recess?
No, thank you.
Thank you. We'll return at 1. Thank you. We are resuming the Citizens Redistricting Commission meeting this afternoon on March 20th, or March 19th, 2011, following our lunch break. Everybody that was here this morning is present, quorum's present. I have an announcement, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ward.
Thank you. Last minute considerations. And happy to announce that we have adopted, by overwhelming majority, a new tagline. And without a drum roll, it'll be fair representation, democracy at work. Thank you for getting me your feedback.
Thank you. I'm done with the maps. Thank you very much. Now, continuing on our agenda item, the next bidder for consideration is the Rose Institute. And Ms. Johnston, would you like to proceed as you had done with Q2 and going through the staff's evaluation process?
Okay. And again, what we've done is point out anything we noted, and it's up to you to decide its significance. The first one, one problem with their submissions, which was just a logistical problem, is not all the original signatures were in the same volume. So we had to look through different volumes to find them. And we did not find an original signature for the bidder declaration. Sorry.
Hold the microphone. No.
So we did not find a signature on the bid declaration, which is about 10 pages into their package. Now, Mr. Johnson pointed out that it's ambiguous whether that requires a signature or not. And he can certainly explain why he thought it was not required, but we did note that. The second, and the importance of that signature is the document has to do with whether or not you have a subcontractor included in your bid. And from other information, we suspect there may be a subcontractor, but again, that can be clarified by Mr. Johnson. Okay. The second issue, again, may be considered fairly minor, was that it was not done in a consecutively numbered and tabbed fashion, which again made it more difficult for us, but if the information was there, we found it nonetheless. Yes, all down the rest, except we haven't looked at the cost worksheet, of course.
I can't hear you.
On page 5 of our evaluation, they're all yeses. The next question on page 5C is the same issue I mentioned previously, that the bidder declaration form was not signed, and it says there are no subcontractors, where we felt that Lisa Hanley appeared to be a subcontractor because she's not employed by Rose Institute, she's employed by another entity, and she was included in their team. The next one is a conflicts and impartiality statement. What was provided was a simple statement in 2 places that there was no conflicts. Again, we did not look outside the scope of the material submitted with the bid for that, but we did find 5 areas of conflict, some more significant, we think, than others. But again, that's up to you. The first one is Lisa Hanley, who reports on her resume that she worked for the Ohio State Democratic Party and the Pennsylvania State Democratic Party.
Could you give us the years with those two, if you recall?
She did not give us the years. Well, it says client since 2000. It's under a section on her resume, page 2 of her resume, at the bottom. The list is of U.S. clients since 2000, and the last 2 listed are the Ohio State Democratic Party. It's about halfway through the package of the bid. Has everyone found it? We'll actually be referring to these pages for the next few things about conflict, so is everyone on that right page? Yes? Okay. The next potential conflict, remember we're looking for any deviation. Chloe Cotton, who is a student, reports that she worked as an intern for U.S. Senator in Alaska, who happens to be a Democrat. We looked him up. That's outside the scope of the record, but it's public information, so we thought we were entitled to it.
Who was, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Who was the...
If you find the section where they have all the resumes together, which is about 2/3 of the way through the...
I've got it.
She's now speaking of Cotton.
Yeah.
No.
Chloe Cotton, they're alphabetical. They're listed, the resumes are included alphabetically. So she had a summer intern program with a senator from Alaska. The next one, Justin Levitt, reports that he worked for the Assembly Caucus, the Republican Assembly Caucus Office of Policy in Sacramento from 2006 to 2007. Everyone able to find that page?
I've got it. Thank you.
What?
If you were still looking, which one we go?
I think if you were still looking for it. The next is Helen Pollock. And she reports that she, let's see, what was her conflict? She was an intern for the Republican Assembly Office of Policy from May 2008 to July 2008, where she provided analyses of Republican positions on state and assembly bills for the 32 Republican assemblymen. And the final one we noted was for Samuel Stone, who is another student, and he served as a constituent services intern for Senator Boxer in the summer of 2008. So that is why we felt that there was a discrepancy between reporting no conflicts and what was revealed by the resumes provided. On down our page 7, again, on page 5 of the evaluation, there's no problem until you get to the Secretary of State, where we were asked to determine whether they were in good standing with the Secretary of State's office. That's on page 6 of our analysis. And Rose Institute is not registered, but Claremont McKenna College is. So technically the contract, if you decide to go with Rose, would probably